Perhaps it is even the cruelest part of law. So why do I say that? Criminal law is cruel. Criminal law is cruel. Perhaps it is even the cruelest part of law. So why do I say that? Well, because criminal law actually has the power to imprison people, and that, in a sense, is very evil. We know that imprisonment is not a good thing for anyone. But all Western democracies agree that we need a criminal justice system, and therefore we need criminal law as well. We need a legal system that deals with questions like, what is a crime? When can you be responsible for it? What is a punishment? And what kind of punishments are allowed? We also need to deal with questions like, what is a fair trial? And how do the police and prosecutors work during the preliminary investigation, before a case reaches the court? This investigatory part of the criminal justice system is very important because it actually sets the boundaries for the proceedings in the court. It is absolutely vital, both to the criminal proceedings and to the verdict, what sort of evidence the police and prosecutors manage to bring forward. One way of obtaining information that could be used as evidence is by using AI. And in this lecture, I will talk about the use of AI during the investigatory part of the criminal legal process. More precisely, I will focus on the use of CCTV cameras in public places. CCTV cameras have been used worldwide during a few decades and have had quite a big impact on criminal legal investigations in many different settings. But the use of these cameras varies between different countries. For example, in the US and in the UK, CCTV is quite commonly used. And in the US, the term video surveillance cameras is also used. In other countries like Germany, the attitude is much stricter, and the use of surveillance cameras is less common. In Sweden, the use of these cameras has been increasing during the last decade. It was also one of the measures proposed in 2019 to counteract lethal violence committed by gangs and organized crime in Sweden. So what is CCTV? Well, this abbreviation is short for closed-circuit television and is typically automated cameras placed in public spaces like streets, squares, and parks. Broadly speaking, there are two purposes for using these cameras. One use is to identify suspects and provide information about where they have been and at what time. So the information has a lot to do with identification of the offender. Another aim is to prevent crime. But there is one major downside with the use of these cameras, and that it is the individual's integrity and interest not to be surveilled and controlled. So what sort of considerations should be made before allowing the use of CCTV cameras? What sort of information could CCTV cameras present in general? And why could the use of CCTV cameras be problematic? Let's start with the first question. What sort of considerations should be made before allowing the use of CCTV cameras? These are general considerations, applicable to most countries, but I will use examples from Swedish law. Quite commonly, an assessment has to be made by the authorities before they give permission to use a CCTV camera in a public space. Generally, the permission is given when the interest of camera surveillance is more important than the interest of the individual not to be controlled. One of the main arguments generally used in favor of using these cameras is typically to prevent, reveal, and investigate crime. It needs to be stressed that the cameras should be a complement to other means and not the only one. On the part of the individual's interest, the authorities are particularly looking at how the surveillance is being carried out. For example, the recording of visual material is normally needed, whereas the recording of sounds should be considered particularly privacy sensitive and would need a thorough examination before being used. Another matter is what kind of area that is being surveyed. Normally, it would be sufficient to show that there are problems with criminality at a square, in a street, or at a train station, even if the application of permission for a CCTV camera concerns only a part of this square, street, or station. Let's move on to the second question. What sort of information could CCTV cameras present in general? The main information we get from these cameras is the identification of individuals. To be able to identify someone, it is generally needed that identifying features are visible. For example, the whole face or the whole body. Also, particular clothes, movements, or a particular constitution of the body could make an identification possible. Let's move on to the third question. How could the use of CCTV cameras be problematic? I would like to mention two main risks. Firstly, I would like to point out the risk of uncertainty when it comes to ethnicity and gender in the interpretation of the information about identification. For example, American research shows that the most advanced AI facial recognition tools make mistakes much more often in cases with black women than in cases with white men. Secondly, there is an obvious risk of unnecessary surveillance in general and also a risk of surveillance of exposed areas where criminality is supposed to be more frequent. Consequently, specific neighborhoods and certain population groups are more surveyed than others. I will let this quote from American researcher Adam Schwartz, describing Chicago, illustrate the risk of unnecessary surveillance. Chicago's system of video surveillance cameras has three critical features: their vast numbers, their tight integration, and their powerful abilities to gather and analyze information. Together, these features empower city government to monitor anyone automatically, quickly, easily, inexpensively, and surreptitiously in all public places and at all times. This vision is of course not valid globally, but it is a necessary reminder of the downside of camera surveillance and consequently the use of AI in preliminary investigations. So I would like to finish by also reminding you about the assessment that should be made by relevant authorities before giving permission to use camera surveillance.